Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Southeastern Region's Regional Advisory Council meeting. We have a large agenda tonight, so we hope that you will participate with us for as long as you can. So first of all, I want to say due to COVID-19 pandemic and the ability of the virus to spread from person to person, government has implemented a number of executive orders directed at controlling spread of this virus by minimizing face-to-face interactions. Public gatherings are strongly discouraged by the CDC, state of Utah, and local health departments, since they facilitate face-to-face contact and pose an elevated risk of virus transmission. The Division of Wildlife Resources and the chair of this public body have determined that public gatherings at the Regional Advisory Council and the Wildlife Board meetings represent a substantial risk to the health and safety of those that attend, and we will conduct this meeting via fully electronic format. This meeting format is authorized by recent amendment to the Utah Code 1 and executive order by the Governor, Gary Herbert, and will be temporarily used in place of in-person meetings that usually occur around this date. Anyone wishing to comment on agenda topics in the future meetings or observe this meeting may do so via the division's webpage. And that being said, I want to state that we really appreciate all of the comments that have been coming to us. I know that we have gotten quite a bit just via the comment section of that website, but also via emails. And I think that that's extremely important. And we really appreciate you being a part of the public process. So that being said, we're going to move on to agenda item 1, which is, well, first of all, I want to state that you have a number of individuals on this meeting tonight. I'm not going to point out everybody, but you have pretty much the bulk of the Southeastern RAC. You have Chris Wood, the Southeastern Regional Director, and then a number of division employees that represent different agenda items, and they're here for the RAC to ask questions to or just provide additional information. So we have quite a few individuals on this meeting right now. We have 32 to be exact. So hopefully we'll be able to provide you the information that you need. So welcome. And at this point, so the way that this meeting is going to work is the presentations have already been presented and you should have watched them. So we will go right into Chris Wood will present us with survey results from individuals that did participate in the surveys regarding the agenda items. Then we'll move into questions from the RAC members to individuals that are presenting the agenda items. And after that, we'll go into comment and negotiations, basically negotiations, and move into motion. So we have a lot on our plate this evening. So first of all, I want to talk about approval of agenda and minutes. Do I have a motion on that?
I didn't see anything wrong and I'll make a motion to approve agenda and minutes.
Thank you, Kent. So I have a motion by Kent Johnson to approve the agenda and minutes this evening. Do I have a second on that?
Yeah, this is Brad. I'll second it.
Great, thank you. And I have a second by Brad Richmond. So at this time, if you don't mind, I am going to just do a roll call on this. So just say yay or nay, if you would, Garish. I've lost him. Kent?
Yay. And you're breaking up at times when other people are on.
Okay. Jeff?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Thank you. Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kirk? Kirk, you may need to unmute. I think he's here.
Kirk's not in front of his camera right now, so he might have stepped away.
Brad?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Thank you. Helene?
Yay.
Is Todd here?
Yes.
Thank you. Dana?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll just ask one more time really quick. Garish, are you here?
Yep.
And yes on minutes and agenda?
Yay.
Thank you. And Kirk?
Yes and yes.
Thank you. So that has passed unanimously. So at this point, we're going to move on to the Wildlife Board update by Chris Wood. If you took over that for me, sorry.
I represented the RAC at the last board meeting. Trish had other duties to do. And by the way, congratulations is in order for Trish. She won her election a few weeks ago, and she is now a Grand County Councilwoman. So congratulations, Trish. She tells me that even though she's kind of a big deal now, she's still gonna be friends with all of us. So that's good news. She will represent her constituents well in Grand County. If you remember, last RAC meeting was really quick, and tonight will be a little longer, I assume. But it was over aquatics and fishing recommendations. Maybe I'll go over a few board motions that were passed. The board passed a motion to send a letter to the Wyoming Fish and Game Commission requesting true reciprocity of state fishing licenses between Wyoming and Utah on the Flaming Gorge interstate waters. And that passed unanimously. Another motion passed unanimously. It was a motion to accept the division's recommendations as presented, with the addition that anglers return tagged northern pike on Utah Lake, but the catch and kill order for non-tagged northern pike remain in place. And then finally, there was a rule amendment that we proposed that had to deal with military servicemen and women who were deployed. Went through the RAC board process and it was modified just a little bit. It'll now be changed so that those who are active duty and deployed outside of Utah will be eligible for that change of benefits. It has to do with bonus points and such. So that's all I have. Everything else passed as presented.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for doing that for me. So at this point, I'm going to just keep you online and you can do the regional update if you don't mind.
I can do that. We have a long night, I think, ahead of us, several hours, I think. So I'm just going to try to make this pretty quick. In our aquatics section, this week, our two biologists, our aquatics biologists will be down at Recapture in San Juan County, and they're going to start the certification process for northern pike that'll assist our statewide tiger muskie program. Our other aquatic work that's happening in the region, we just finished up a restoration project on Huntington Creek in Emory County. And that was a project where we took boulders and downed trees and brought in heavy equipment and improved the stream habitat for fish. And so after the fire several years ago, the stream needed some work, and they spent several weeks up there improving that stream. We have another restoration project going on near Moab on our Scott M. Matheson Wetlands Preserve, just north of Moab. They're dredging the central pond as we speak, and they're making that pond a little deeper so that it acts as a good nursery for some of the native fish that are along that river. And so they built a system where the water will flush into the wetland. The fish will be able to have a nursery for their young, and then at certain times of the year, be able to flush those fish back out to the river. So it's an exciting project. There's been a lot of good press. NPR is there this week covering the story. It's exciting. We also put in 57 BDAs, what we call them. They're Beaver Dam Analogs. We try to replicate what a beaver would do. We did that in Miller Creek, which is on the Carbon-Emory County line, on some land there. That'll stabilize the banks, allow wetland and riparian vegetation to establish, and create better habitat there. And then on our Lower Fish Creek project, our Lower Fish Creek WMA, were burning piles of slash that were from previous years of restoration work. And we did that today as well. So our wildlife section is busy as well. They're doing bighorn sheep flights this week. This year, we're doing the potash, the Lockhart, and the San Juan units. The biologists are also working on deer classifications, and they're working on bear hunt recommendations, which are coming up at the next RAC. I thought I'd give a quick update on the Range Creek bison hunt. If you remember, the board and the RAC and the board passed a plan that was brought together by a committee that formed for a year or two. And this committee came up with a bunch of recommendations on how to handle the bison that are coming across the river from the Ute tribe lands onto private and public lands. And one of the strategies we identified that passed the RAC and the board was to have a bison hunt, an over-the-counter bison hunt. I think we sold 188 tags is what I last heard. And so far, 57 bison have been harvested. And those bison have been harvested both on public and private lands. So it's been, for us as an agency, we look at that as a big success. We had no idea what the success rate was going to be, but I think 57 out of 188 so far is pretty good. And I've heard some feedback from some of the people who've gone out, and they're having an amazing time. Of course, this is a hunt that takes a lot of preparation and a lot of knowledge, and it's backcountry, and most of them have horses. I think all of them have horses. A few have maybe run the river, but it's for very skilled hunters. But people are up to the challenge, and that hunt is going on now, and it will be till the end of January. It will decrease a little bit. The access into Range Creek through the museum property stops on December 1st. And then at some point, the weather will close out Turtle Canyon. And of course, the river will freeze too. And so access will be very, very difficult in the upcoming months. But so far, 57 bison. We're excited to see that. And that's all the updates I got. I can answer any questions or have some biologists and law enforcement officers online too if you have any questions.
Are there any questions for Chris? That's pretty cool to see that hunt was so successful, because I know it's a really hard terrain to access. So that's a great tool.
Maybe I'll mention too, it's been pointed out by the Emory County Sheriff and the BLM that the river is really low at this point. So it's probably dangerously low. So really only very skilled river runners should be running the river at this time of the year. And check with the BLM for more condition updates.
Thank you. Any more questions for Chris at this point, or some of the
I have a question, probably more for Jeff. Jeff, as a landowner, have you seen any problems? Has there been any issues with trespass or things like that from this hunt?
Yeah, we got problems. They've driven most of the buffalo from Range Creek onto the private land. So yeah, we got a whole new issue to deal with right now.
Any more questions or comments?
Yeah, I've got a question. Chris, how many buffalo have been counted? What's the division's estimate of how many are on the west side of the river there?
I don't know exact. And in the past, there's been 300 to 500 bison that have come across the river at different points, and they'll come across the river, and sometimes they'll head back east and go back on their tribal lands, and then they'll come back. And so there's a 4 or 5 month period they kind of go back and forth in these big herds. So yeah, I've heard anywhere from 200 to 500 at a time.
Is Brad here today, or is he? No.
He's on the phone, I believe. He's driving back to Price.
He was supposed to fly either last week or this week. We'd like to get an update on what's on top.
Yeah,
Do you know what's on the private land on top now?
I do not, but that's a good point I was going to bring up too. We have a hunt planner on our website, and people call Brad all the time and ask where the bison are. And as an agency, we're going to try to update the public in a fair fashion, fair manner, by updating our hunt planner. And I believe he was going to fly at the end of this week, and then update the hunt planner as to what he's observing with where bison are.
So,
Chris, this is Guy.
The other day. Go ahead,
I was just going to say he's going to fly tomorrow. He's on his way. He's trying to get connected right now, but he is flying tomorrow.
I knew it was Thursday. I just didn't know whether it was last week or this week. When I talked to him last week, he said there was approximately 40 head on top, and there was nothing in the canyon when he talked to me then. So I don't know. That's what I just try to get an update on what's going on. Obviously, everyone knows the issues on the private land. Yeah, it's not a real good situation right now.
Okay, are there any more questions at this time or comments? So if not, we're going to go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5, which is Waterfowl recommendations and amendments by Blair Stringham. And so hopefully you've taken the time to watch the presentation by Blair and you know the amendments that they are proposing. So at this time, Chris, do you want to go ahead and give your update as far as public comments?
Sure. We had 26 people fill out our public questionnaire, which is a lot for our region. So we had great participation this RAC go around. And just for those who don't understand the process, every time you fill out a questionnaire, that your survey gets sent to all the RAC members, a lot, as well as all your comments you filled out in the questionnaire. So the RAC members have received your input and read your comments, and have come tonight prepared to discuss some of those things. So for the waterfowl recommendations, we had 26 people fill out the survey. 83% were neutral. No, is that right? No, 83%. Is that right? Neutral, and then 16% opposed, and no one supported. Is that on my? Yeah, that's what I have.
Okay.
Everyone in our region was neutral on waterfowl recommendations.
Okay. So at this point, do I have questions from the RAC for Blair? There was, definitely some things in there that we've received a number of emails regarding. So are there any questions for Blair that stand out?
Yeah, I have one. This is Brad.
Great.
Blair, after reviewing the public comments and also watching the prior RAC meetings, that first item that allows permanent blinds on Village Spur, I know it's a long ways from our area, but it seems to me that'd just be a source of aggravation for both the division and hunters. So I'm wondering if the division's thinking of rethinking that, or what their motive was for proposing that in the first place.
No, that's a great question, Brad. It probably deserves a little bit of backstory. So we got this property basically given to us through the legislative process about 1.5 years ago. And so we put together a committee to talk about some of the issues on the property. And one of those being the permanent blind situation. And we don't typically do these on any of our other waterfowl properties, but on the Willard Spur, it's unique because there have been blinds out there for a long, long time, a lot longer than before we had the property. So this committee voted to keep those blinds on the property. And so basically we needed to come up with a process to keep those blinds on there. And that was the permitting process that you probably read about in the rule change there. And so it's not a standard practice with it. It's also not something we want to see any new blinds out there, but it is something that the committee wanted to keep. They are fairly popular with hunters on that specific WMA. And so that's the reasoning for trying to keep those on the property.
Blair, this is Eric. Is it possible to grandfather those existing blinds in, but not allow word put the verbiage to where no new blinds can be built? Because I understood it now. New blinds could be built, permanent blinds could be built, but would that, is there something like that possible?
Yeah, definitely. And so the language that you looked at in the rule was basically to accommodate any new blinds as well. They would have to get permission from us first, so people just weren't haphazardly putting blinds out there. But any new blinds, we probably would have little interest in seeing out there. So modifying that to allow the existing blinds and no new blinds would be a great landing spot for us.
Are there any other questions for Blair?
Yeah, I've got one, Blair. So from the division standpoint, what is the advantage of allowing those biological or user standpoint? What is the advantage of allowing the blinds to remain and contrasted to the disadvantage of allowing new blinds to be constructed?
Okay, yeah, so there's multiple challenges with the blind. So the area,
because your presentation really didn't go into any detail of, the benefits that the division sees on.
So the area itself, it's about 10,000 acres, and most of our properties are made up of kind of small little impounded areas that are a couple hundred acre size ponds. And this one is primarily just a gigantic pond. And so I guess the benefits of the blinds is that they're out in the open water, so it makes it easier for people to hunt some of those areas. But I guess some of the challenges with those is that a lot of them are basically level with the water surface, or some of them are even slightly below the water surface. And so there's just a lot of issues with people potentially running into them with boats, or damaging their boats, or potentially worse stuff. And so our hope would be that we would require people, if those remain out there on the property, that they would have to have a permit, which would require them to disclose where they are, so we know exactly where those blinds are, as well as to mark them with reflectors and things, so that people navigating in that area would be able to see them and not hit them.
So the main disadvantage of the existing blinds is they're a safety hazard.
Yeah, for the most part.
What are the advantages of them? So why would the division support an amendment that would say no new blinds, but allow these to remain? So what is the disadvantage of new blinds? So you could attack it from that direction.
I guess just having more of those out there is likely going to just increase the chances of somebody running into them with their boat or something like that. And so the committee themselves, as well as some of the legislators that put this bill together, really didn't want to see any new structures out there if at all possible. And so we included any new blinds just so there would be a process if that did happen. But by and large, our agency probably doesn't want to see many new blinds out there just because of the hazards they pose for people using that area.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have any additional comments for Blair? Okay, so at this point, I will begin to, if there's no more questions, are there any comments? And if there's no comments, we can move on to possible motions.
Chris, if there's no comments, I'll make a motion. I move that we as the RAC board recommend allowing the existing blinds, but also disallow any new permanent construction of any new blinds, any construction of new blinds.
So allowing the existing blinds. And so this is deviating. This is just kind of basically a sub motion from what Blair is recommending, because he has 3 things within his recommendations. So allowing existing blinds, but disallowing any new blinds. Is that correct, Brad?
Yes, that's correct. I assume we're going to take this part by part, 1, 2, and 3. So
Can do that.
that first part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yep, I have a motion by Brad Richmond to make a sub motion that would allow the existence of blinds that are already in place, but disallowing any new blinds. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
And I have a second by Eric Luke. Are there any questions on that motion at this time?
I would have, I'd have a question, or just to confirm that those existing blinds would still need the permit so that the safety things that was mentioned would still be in place or required.
Yep. So we would require any blinds out there to have a permit.
Yeah.
That would include the existing.
And this is Darren. I just want to clarify. So is this different from what the division? This does not sound different, is it? Not allow existing new blinds. Is that the different part? I guess I'm trying to understand what the difference is.
Yeah, so the wording in the rule change had included the word new, so to accommodate any new blinds, and this would basically just be excluding that, which we're good.
Okay.
Are there any more questions and comments on that motion? So if not, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick roll call on Brad Richmond's motion, which is disallowing allowing existing blinds, but disallowing any new blinds to exist on Willard Spur. So Garish, yay or nay?
Nay.
Thank you, Kent.
Yay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yay.
Thank you, Scoot.
Yay.
Eric,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Eric. I'm sorry, Kirk. Sorry about that.
Yay.
Sorry about that. Brad,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yay.
Todd. Is Todd there? Todd, are you there? He was there a second ago.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Nay.
No. Thank you. And Dana.
Yes.
Okay, great. So that motion passed 11-1. Okay. So we still have the remainder of the waterfowl rule changes that Blair has presented. Are there any more questions or comments for Blair? And if not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the remainder of the waterfowl changes as submitted by the division.
So I have a motion by Kent Johnson to accept the remainder of the waterfowl rule amendments as proposed. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
And I have a second by Helene Taylor. Are there any questions or comments on that before I move to a roll call? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call. Garish, yes or no? I'm getting him. Kent?
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yay.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Aline,
Yay.
Todd,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
and Garish. Are you there?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes or no on that motion? There you are.
Yes.
Okay.
And yes.
Thank you. Okay, that motion passed unanimously. Blair, thank you so much. You are free. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to agenda item number 6, which is the 2021 big game seasons, key dates, hunt changes, and rule amendments by Covy. Hopefully you've taken the time to watch that video. I think that the best way, well, at this point, Chris, are you there? Do you want
I'm here. So let me give an overview.
Great.
We had 75% of our respondents oppose the proposal. 16.5% support it, and then 8% were neutral. And then, of course, you received a lot of comments that I will not go over, but you have them in front of you.
Right. And what was the neutral percentage again? I'm sorry.
The neutral percentage was 8%.
8%. Thank you. Okay, so I think at this point, it's time for you guys to ask questions from Covy. Covy, are you around? Or did you just stop?
Yeah, I'm right here. Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
In the other RACs, the way that we've handled this is to take it systematically by species, and kind of the same way that the same format the memo's written in, the presentation went, starting with deer, moving to elk, pronghorn, and then once in a lifetime. And it's just made it in a format where if there are changes that we want to make or questions we have about particular recommendations, it's just gone more smoothly. If you're amenable to that, I would love to follow that same format.
Yep, I am down with that. So do you want to do that at this point, or do you want to take questions on everything and then start, dividing it up as we move into comments and motions? Or do you want to start cutting it up right now?
If Madam Chair, if you're okay with dividing it by, starting with just general season hunt dates and then going into recommended changes for deer and then for elk, and see if we have independent motions to deviate from the division's recommendations by species, I would love to do it that way if that's okay.
Okay, great. All right, so let's just talk about right now questions for Covy regarding general season hunt dates. And nothing on that. So do you think we should make it a motion on just the hunt date separately, or how do you feel about that?
And again, just following the pattern so that the RACs went really smoothly, is if there's no deviation from it or no comments, we just sum that all up at the end.
Yeah.
And only motions are different throughout.
Okay. All right. So now we start kind of moving into species. You want to talk about deer?
Yeah, let's talk about deer. One question I have is, in the committees that were formed, I understand they only met one time for the LaSalle's and the San Juan, and it was a short meeting. And my question is why? I understand, I guess I'll preface it by saying I understand the reason why the age objectives were reduced on some of those units, but my question is why was it done so dramatically?
And honestly, we want to get into that, answer that question. But right now we're in the big game recommendations portion. So for deer, the changes were the North Slope, discontinuation of the North Slope limited entry hunt, and then a new mid-season hunt in there, and the discontinuation of the Henry's management buck hunts. So that's the next agenda item. Are the deer unit management plans.
So if there's,
Covy, I have a question regarding the Henrys. What is, I know it's managed by an age class of the age harvested, but what is our buck to doe ratio? Because I know that herd is not doing great. And if we have way too many bucks on the ground, that could potentially be a problem. So what is our current buck to doe ratio on the Henrys right now?
Eric, the last year that we have data on was 38 bucks per 100 does. And as a trophy unit, now you're right, population wise, having more bucks on the ground can hurt a population when you're not stable or increasing. That said, we do manage that unit for trophy, and we're below the management objective for buck-doe ratios. So buck-doe ratios we manage for 45 to 55 in premium limited entry. And then in addition to that, the average age, I'm trying to remember, 40% or greater or older than 5 years old. And we're meeting that metric. But we can see the population trending down as the buck-doe ratio is lower than the management objective. But that's a good point, Eric.
so are there any more questions for Covy regarding deer? And if not, comments before we move on to elk? We might get on a motion on that. We'll just move on to elk.
Covy, I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but I know we've had this discussion before, and it's a kind of a tough thing to solve, but I see more and more and more of our crab claw 4 points down on the Henrys. As a division thought, is there something we can do there? I know it becomes a management nightmare, but right now the trophy hunters won't shoot them. The management bucks can't shoot them. And so we're leaving all the crab claw 4 points there to do the rest of the breeding. Has there been any discussion about that and a possible solution to that?
We've thought about giving that segment of the population a stern talking to. Just let them know that's inappropriate. We don't appreciate them passing on their genes. Eric, I know that was a joke, but the truth is, in a wild population, we both understand that it's really, really hard to manage those types of things. Almost impossible. And in a closed population behind a high fence, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. We've seen it. We've seen people do it. When you get into a wild population and hunters, obviously, if you have a Henry's permit, you want to harvest the biggest, highest quality, best antlered buck you can, and it gets really, really tough, things like that. So I understand your concern. I'm not saying it's not a concern. I don't have good answers. I'm willing to put our heads together, and if we can find something, love to discuss it.
Okay. So do we have any individual motions regarding the deer, which is simply the new hunt on the North Slope, discontinued hunts in the Henrys, management, and North Slope of Summit, limited entry? Because if not, we'll move on to elk.
Trish, what about the deer population objectives? Is that part of this agenda item?
No, yeah, that's a separate agenda item, number 7. So we're on number 6 right now.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we'll go ahead and move on to elk. And we did have quite a few emails regarding some agenda items on that. Covy, do you want me to go over this, or I can have people starting asking. Go ahead.
Sure, or we can look at it, and I think some of the major issues are the kind of the history behind the elk plan review. And if the RAC would like, I can dive into that a little bit deeper than I did in the presentation, talk to the rationale of some of the recommendations, and then answer any questions. Is that appropriate or? Yeah. Okay. I saw some shaking their head yes. So with permission, then I'll dive into that a little bit. So a couple years ago, the board directed us to look at the elk plan. First of all, they wanted us to look at the elk plan and see if we had room for some primitive weapon hunts. It was 2 years ago, this came up at a board meeting. And the question was asked, can we do this? And we said, well, it's not in the current plan. I said, well, you look at that. I said, sure, but we have to rewrite the deer plan first. Let us do that first, and then we'll commit to looking at that. Last year, the board directed us to, again, when we met together with the elk committee, to look at age objectives. So the elk plan has been in place for 5 years now. It's a 7-year plan, so we have 2 years left on the plan. And they said after 5 years of adjusting permits, we should be hitting our age objectives. And if we're not in some of these units, we'd like to know why and see if there's some room for adjustment. And so we committed to do that with the elk committee again. And when I say elk committee, we brought back together the same committee that we had when we wrote the plan 5 years ago and said, hey, we'd like to do a mid-plan review, be proactive here, and if there are things that aren't working well, and have some tweaks and address these issues. In addition to that, when we met, it was September 1st, and it was right on the heels of a very difficult sales day when the demand for any bull permits far outweighed the supply. And as a committee, and the reason why I'm giving all this story and all this background is because it all plays into the recommendations that follow. So as a committee, we discussed what is the purpose behind the any bull general season hunt? Why do we have it? Why do we want to continue to have it? And what does it mean to us as hunters and sportsmen here in the state of Utah? And the sentiment was overwhelmingly that it was our last over-the-counter hunt. It's our last hunt where families can go down, buy a tag, and go out and hunt. Anybody who's hunted any bull already knows the hunt is hard. And we understood that there could be some complicating factors, reduction in deer permits, COVID, and other things that led to that increased demand. But we've also seen the demand coming over the years in the data, along with the multi-season permit probably contributed to this as well. But we were headed that direction is my point. So we're headed that direction. And this last year, we exceeded the demand, and we sold all of the any bull permits in just over 7 hours. It would have been quicker if the system would have processed the payments more quickly. Now, as far as demand, we know that we have a constituency who wants to go and hunt this hunt. So as we spoke with the committee, one of the things we said, if the goal is to maintain this as an opportunity, as a family hunt, and keep it over the counter, one of the things that we wanted to do was relieve the pressure on the system. And so that was the rationale behind the unlimited any bull permits. The committee felt like they could support that, but they could only support that if we had additional areas to hunt. So what we did is we went through every unit by unit, and we asked the question, okay, is this unit meeting management objectives for the average age of the bulls being harvested? Yes or no? If it's not, why? What changes should we recommend? And where should we go from there? So on some of the units, we looked at them and we said, for example, when we went through the 3 units, we changed the age objective, the Book Cliffs, Little Creek, the Cache Meadowville, and the Central Mountains Nebo. We said, what are the surrounding units managed at? And is the solution here just best to move those to what the surrounding are? Because those elk are moving back and forth between the surrounding units. And, the Book Cliffs, Little Creek, it's the roadless area. It's just too small to manage independently of the rest of the Book Cliffs. The Cache Meadowville, watching the collar data, those elk are more similar to the Cache South than the Cache North. And so it made sense to increase that age objective where we're managing on the Cache South for a higher age objective. And then in the Central Mountains Nebo, where we're managing for 6.5 to 7, those elk move back and forth between the Manti a lot, and it made more sense to manage those more similar to the Manti at 5.5 to 6. Now, when we looked at other units that were offering very few limited entry permits, we decided to take the board's suggestion and offer what the division has come up with as a primitive weapon hunt. And along with, there's been a demand in limited entry for years to have a September archery hunt. And so we took a few units that weren't performing well as limited entry units. And some of those are just portions of units that were underutilized. And we took the Cache North, the Stansbury portion of the Ochre Stansberries, the West Desert Deep Creeks, and the Plateau Barney Top portion of the Boulder, Plateau Barney Top Comparawitz. And we recommended those as September archery, October, November handgun archery, muzzleloader shotgun hunts. So they're still limited entry, but they're a different strategy on those units that weren't meeting or weren't a good fit for the current limited entry system. Now, we still continue to look at these and thought, what units make sense and fit under the plan's definition of an any bull unit, if we want to add more any bull units and more opportunity in that. And when we looked at it, there are portions of the box elder sawtooth, the Ochre Stansbury East, which has a lot of private ground that's inaccessible, and some accessible ground, but very difficult to access. A lot of areas are refugium. The Southwest Desert North, again, harder area to hunt, but areas are refugium. And the 9 Mile Anthro, which has some tribal land and other things inside the unit that make it so that it doesn't function well as a limited entry unit. It's also surrounded by general season on both sides. And the committee felt like these areas would be good to recommend as general season. Now, with that recommendation of additional, the committee felt like that it was acceptable to remove the cap of 15,000 on those permits and relieve some of that pressure. It sounds like a crazy idea. When you look around at other states, it's pretty common. Colorado does have an antler point restriction, but unlimited for both residents and non-residents for elk. Idaho, unlimited for residents for elk. Wyoming, unlimited for residents for elk. Montana, unlimited for residents for elk. Now, in our state, that may not be socially acceptable, and we understand that in reviewing the comments and the social pressure there. Part of this is definitely social, but that's the rationale behind the recommendation. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions on this.
I've got one right off. This unlimited, most of those states, excluding Colorado and Idaho, I think Colorado has, many magnitudes more elk than we do. They are, so like your Montana and that's only resident. What we're talking about is both. That's night and day right there.
That's the way the recommendation's presented. We don't have a lot of demand for non-resident permits in the state. The percentage that we sell of non-resident permits is pretty low. Lindy's on here and she can get that to us. But
we actually sold. I was gonna say we sold 661 non-resident permits, any bull permits this year. That's it. So it's really, really low for non-residents.
Well, and if that's something that the RAC wanted to address, I think this is the appropriate time. And again, Kirk, this may be something that isn't ready for our public. when we said there wasn't a biological concern, we know that we're not going to impact the number of bulls to where we don't have the chance to impregnate every cow, right? But that doesn't mean it's going to create a better hunt or things like that either. There are downsides to every recommendation and upsides.
Yeah, the only other
Covy. Two things, I guess. Well, just one. Did you discuss anything like Colorado does, Montana does, with, over-the-counter unlimited tags, but they have an antler point restriction to reduce the impact on the harvest? And was that discussed? And that's the reason Colorado doesn't do it, Montana doesn't do it as a trophy quality thing, because that doesn't work to manage for trophy that way. But they do it as an opportunity thing where they can continue to offer opportunity for everybody that wants a chance without a big negative impact on the numbers. Was that discussed at all?
It was a brief discussion, actually, but we didn't settle in on anything with that at the final recommendation. But I understand that concern as well.
And was it discussed whether or not, before we've had, it sounds like, insignificant numbers of non-residents going after what was a limited amount of first come, first served permits. If you put it with an unlimited number, was any discussion put on that? Non-residents are going to look at it and say, wow, all I got to do is show up in Utah and run to the hardware store. Did you discuss that at all and the possibilities of an impact that way?
We look back at the data where we didn't used to sell out until later, and it wasn't a concern then either. There wasn't that rush by non-residents, or they didn't show up when the permits lasted up until later, and so we just didn't feel like it was a concern. But I don't want to say that it's not a concern for the RAC. So that's the recommendation, and that's the rationale.
Okay, thanks.
Covy,
go ahead.
Covy, a couple of quick questions on the age objective. I guess most everybody knows this, but probably not. I'm still on a learning curve, but I assume that the age objective, if you raise the age objective, you lower the permits, or the permits are based on age objective, correct?
That's correct. So we look at the average age of harvest over the last 3 years, and then adjust permits accordingly, up or down, to be within that window of the age objective.
Right. Okay. And the second question, when you said all the anti-bull permits were sold in about a 7-hour span, how many is that? What was the number of permits?
That's another really good question. So the plan capped that at 15,000 permits. So we sold 15,000 permits. Some additional information that might be important to the RAC to understand too is that we did look back again, and in the last 5 years, we've sold any bull permits to 33,000 different individuals over the span of the last 5 years.
Thank you.
Hey, Covy. I know that this year they sold out within the first few hours. What's the sellout rate been, let's say, over the last 5-year period? Do you know what that would be?
I'm going to let Lindy answer that because she's on here and she doesn't feel like she gets to talk enough. So.
Oh, I talk enough. So back in 2016, we sold out in 77 days. And then from there, it's just kind of gone each year a little bit more, less days. So 2017, 67 days we sold out. And then 2018, it took 34 days to sell out. And then 2019, it took 11 days. And then this year, it took 7 hours and 45 minutes.
But
so do you think that some people are seeing that number of days being reduced each time? I know for myself, I got on the first day and bought one just because I knew that the year before they'd sold out in a week or two. So there has been some discussion that unlimiting the tags might actually have the opposite effect, where less people are actually buying the tags just because they don't feel the rush like the Costco toilet paper, you know?
Exactly. Yeah,
Have you guys seen that in other species? Is that, you know, is that something that could be legitimately considered?
Scoot, we have seen that in other species. We actually saw that in turkeys. And Lindy, correct me here if I'm wrong, but we went unlimited and over-the-counter turkey permits. The first year we sold over 24,000, Lindy. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And now we're down to about 8,000.
Yep.
And it's just when you see a limit, it feels like there's a mad rush. And when there's not a limit, you know, you might wait up until the last week, have something come up and not buy a tag because something came up and you decide not to hunt that year. So I assume that the first couple years that we may see an increase in permits that we sell. And as folks go out and find out this is not an easy hunt, you would probably see that drop back off.
Covy, on the turkey.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, I think how much of that decrease in sales was due to the fact that after them first couple of years, there were so many birds killed that the turkey hunt itself got much worse. I mean, that's kind of the thing I see happening is with the unlimited any bull tags is first few years you're going to have so many people out there that people are going to be disgusted with it, and we're going to lose interest.
I don't think we saw turkey population crash because of the unlimited on male turkeys, Eric. But I do understand that the social aspect of hunting that hunters want space. And what I would say is, if you want space and if you want a limited entry type of permit, we offer that opportunity here in the state. And you can put in and wait and draw and hunt on that type of hunt. And the intent of this is a general season over-the-counter hunt, which doesn't provide that type of quality space.
Can we also assume that those numbers, meaning you selling out in 7.5 hours or whatever, a lot of that's due to our circumstance right now? We're all sitting on computers. We want to be out of doors. And so we know that in general, for example, Arches has seen all-time high visitation. So we can kind of throw that into the mix.
I think you have to. That in combination with, you know, we cut over 10,000 deer permits. So if you have a good deer tag, or if you have a limited entry bull tag, if you have a limited entry bull tag, you're not going to get one of these permits. Or if you have a good deer tag, you may invest your energy there. But if as many general season permits, it all contributed to this. It wasn't just one thing. And in addition, COVID, wanting to be out, yeah, it all contributed for sure.
Question, Covy, as you looked at these units to decide, I mean, you've listed 5 units that you are wanting to change to an open unit, general season unit that were limited entry units. There are other units in the state that are struggling with reaching those age objectives that are set. And is there any plans? I guess the thing that concerns me is, are we headed, if we don't hit those age objectives, are we headed to general season units on those units as well?
Eric, I think there were several criteria that we considered. And one of them is they had to have the characteristics listed in the plan. Areas of refugia, whether that be wilderness, private land, tribal land, they had to meet those criteria and not just be struggling to meet not just struggling with the age objective. You know, on a large public land unit, we can adjust the number of permits and meet that these ones fit that criteria, and that's why the committee felt like they should recommend it.
Well,
Covy, I got a question. Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
just follow up. I mean, the one unit that concerns me is the book list, because it has all that. I mean, it has wilderness land, it has tribal land, and it's struggling to hit the age objectives. Is there any intentions of the division to change that unit to a general season unit?
No, Eric. The Book Cliffs has a lot of public land as well, a lot of good accessible public land, and it fits the mold where, yeah, that population, you're right, it is struggling. It may be the only elk population in the state that's running into a biological carrying capacity. We understand that. We're working to address those issues, and we'll continue to work to address those issues. But it's a good limited entry unit, and we don't intend to make that recommendation on the book list.
I have a question on the age objective on the book list while we're there, Covy. Was it discussed raising the age objective back up on the Bitter Creek part as opposed to lowering the age objective on the Little Creek? I mean, the comment was made, I'm the one that made the comment when you changed the age objective between the two units. And I actually told you personally in the meeting that it wasn't going to be workable because the Little Creek's too small of a unit that borders tribal land. And we can't control what the Indians do, and we can't, and the elk cross over between tribal land and both of the subunits on the Book Cliffs. But my question is, was it discussed raising the age objective on the Bitter Creek to match the Little Creek instead of vice versa?
I remember that comment. So I guess, first of all, Kent, you were right. But I think we have Dax Mangus on the line. If he could address that a little bit, I would appreciate that. Where they manage a lot of the book lists there, or if not, we also have others on the line too. But Dax, if you're on.
To throw into that same question, why not bring Manti up instead of Nebo down? You know, we're bringing one up in Lacache. Why? Kind of the same question.
I can answer the Manti, or somebody else, one of the biologists can answer the Manti question too. But we'll discuss the book list and then go into the Manti.
So, when the Elk Committee looked at it, the Little Creek is a much smaller unit with a much lower number of permits. If you start doing the math on what it would take to convert the Bitter Creek South to a limited entry, to raise that age class a year. I talked with Kent in Salt Lake, and we were crunching some numbers. You're looking at reducing permits by about a third to get another year of age if everything is stable and doing well. The Book Cliffs elk population, like Covy mentioned, it's probably it's a resource limited elk population. It is probably our only population in the state that is at a biological carrying capacity. Things aren't looking great right now. It is not stable. The age has been declining. We reduced permits last year. In order to raise that age objective by a year, we're looking at probably at least a 50% reduction in permits, and representing a pretty big loss to folks that are applying for that limited entry hunting opportunity on that unit. Whereas reducing the age class by a year on the Little Creek, if we did that, we're there. We don't need to make any changes. We won't need to reduce permits. We also probably won't need to raise permits unless something comes in really surprising, with this year's data. It just seemed like a better fit on that small unit to change it a little bit, where we're not really going to have to do anything drastic to permits versus, making that big change where we basically are going to have to cut permits by 50% to hopefully get there, over a fairly long-term process, 5 to 10 years to build back up and get there. So that's kind of some of the thought behind, why the decision to just make the adjustment to the Little Creek.
And there, in addition to that, when you're resource limited, older bulls doesn't necessarily, an older age class doesn't necessarily mean larger antlers. And, you know, at that point, when you're resource limited, when we look at the heyday of the Book Cliffs, it was right after fire when we didn't have those resource limitations. And so adjusting the age class up may not fix the problem that we intend to solve. And it may put more bulls on a resource limited population that are then heading to Colorado into a general season unit, and Utah hunters will lose out on that opportunity. So we did think about it, and those are some of the thoughts we had. Now, on the manti, it's the same thing. The manti, we've released a lot of nutrient limitations lately. And some of the bulls coming with the fires, the high elevation fires, and even though that's managed at a lower age class of 5.5 to 6, some of the biggest bulls in the state were killed on the manti this year. And so moving that up and cutting back permits on one of the largest elk units in the state just doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, you'd have to cut several hundred permits and take that opportunity back away. And then you go from hunting the manti on a rifle permit every 15 years with a 5-year cooling off period to every 40 years with a 5-year cooling off period. And when you start to really look at draw odds, that's not somewhere we want to go and could support.
Covy, I spent some time talking with Dax and you as well on the Book Cliffs. I think you mentioned the heyday being back when the fire was, and I don't disagree with that at all. But it was also back before the spike hunt was implemented there. Can you tell me what the average harvest success rate is on a normal spike unit?
Yeah, Eric, we actually have some data prepped on this question for the spike hunt on the Book Cliffs and where it is in comparison to other units. Kent, do you have that data? Would you be willing to share your screen and share some of that data? Is that okay? Is that, I think it would answer your question, Eric, just to see where it is in comparison, what they're harvesting and things like that.
Yeah, I'd love to see that, because it seemed like from the, you know, what the number of bulls that were harvested and the past success rates, if I'm correct, I could be wrong because I don't know what the other averages are, but it seems like they've been around 15% typically. And on the Book Cliffs, it's been 25 to 30%.
Higher per hunter for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I need to present my screen or not, Covy, but I can if that's wanted. Yeah. So average spike harvest, Eric, is 11% this past year from 2019. We don't know what it is in 2020 yet, but you're right. The Book Cliffs is about double that, running 22.1. So you definitely do have a higher percent harvest, and that's because it's pretty easily accessible. Lots of roads, a road on every ridge, so you can actually get to the animals, and that certainly helps with success. But in terms of how many are being killed, I ran some numbers, and last year we killed 140 spikes on the Book Cliffs. When you look at that and adjust it for population, the population out there is about 5,500 animals. And so if you look at that, we're killing about 25 spikes per 1,000 elk. You rank that among all the spike units across the state, it ranks, I believe it was 13th out of 19 spike units we have. So it is a very low total number. It doesn't seem near the pressure for spike hunting as we see on the manti. Or let me just look through this list real quick. On the manti, we're killing 31 spikes per 1,000 elk out there. On some of these desert units in the south, Southwest Desert killed 45, Beaver killed 50 per 1,000. So we're seeing a lot more pressure on some of these other units with smaller elk populations and some of our prime units close to the front, like the manti or the Wasatch, where you just get a lot more hunting pressure because the Book Cliffs is 4 or 5 hours out there for some people. Even though it's accessible, a lot of people still won't hunt it or even if they do hunt it, they'll make it a trip rather than just saying, hey, let me go out and hunt this evening or in this morning. So yeah, percent success is high, but when you actually run the numbers, we're only killing maybe a quarter to a third of the spikes that are available. So we still feel like we're having plenty make it into those upper age classes. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks. I guess one comment on that. I know, and I know that the division recognizes it as well, that the quality on that unit has gone downhill substantially over the last few years. I know there's issues with the herd and the biological condition of the cows and bulls as well, but without a doubt, the quality of the bulls that have been harvested on that unit have diminished considerably. So I think something needs to be looked at to be able to try and maintain some opportunity, because we don't want to cut the tags to where our draw odds go from being able to draw 15 or 20 points to 40 points. So, but we need to look at trying to get the quality of the herd back as well.
Well, and Dax can speak to this, but that has been, we have a working group that's working really diligently to look at those populations and try to look at the factors that are affecting those populations. Dax, do you want to add anything to that?
I'll mention a couple things, and I spoke with Eric about this too, and I got to say, Eric's right. The Book Cliffs is struggling. There are some issues down there. We have seen a decline in the average age of our harvested bulls. I'm not to the point where I say the sky is falling, but we've got some issues, and we're working hard on those. Like Trish mentioned, we had that Book Cliffs working group that's gone through a really detailed forage analysis and looking at what some of our issues are. Wild horses has been identified as one of the big ones. And I'm happy to say, I don't have final numbers, but there's been some work with a private horse gather on some non-BLM lands with some feral stray horses that are not wild horses. That's a really positive thing. There's been a ton of habitat work, a ton of water development. You can't hardly drive around out there very long without running into a guzzler somewhere. Just this year, we cleaned out and salted 17 ponds. We've gotten really aggressive on predator management, both bears and cougars. We have some extensive research projects going on in the Book Cliffs, including, the newborn fawn and elk calf survival studies, the neonate studies. It is a priority. We recognize that we have some serious challenges there. We're working on it hard. And I don't disagree with what Eric's saying. And I just hope folks know we're aware, we care, and we're working hard on it. And I'm hoping that by putting in all this work and doing these things, if we can have have some rain, have the climatic conditions line up for us just a little bit, I hope we've done the work that needs to be done for things to really start to turn around. That's my hope. We've thrown just about everything at it we can. If someone can think of something else, give me a call after the meeting. Let's talk about it. I think we're willing to try almost anything. So
that's great, Dax. Thank you. So at this point, and Eric already made a comment, so I think it just kind of moves into a comment period before we start making any motions or sub motions regarding elk at this point, and we can then move on to other species on this agenda item. So any other comments?
Can I?
Yeah.
Let's go ahead, Darren, and then we'll go to Kent.
Can I ask a question about the hams hunt? So I guess just clarification on these units, is there any other elk hunts that will be taking place in these ham units? Spike will still be done, or how does that work?
Yeah, yes, Darren, that's a good question. And the intent is not to take away the the any weapon hunts that are there. So the spike hunt, both muzzleloader and rifle, would still occur on those units. And that's one of the reasons why we recommended such a liberal season length for the hams hunt, is so that if that hunter wanted to not hunt during those general season hunts, they wouldn't have to. But the intent is not to remove those, but to have those. And in addition, this is the new limited entry opportunity. It's archery and hams.
And then I guess along those similar lines, down on the Boulder Plateau, how are those numbers going to be split out between those two hunts? Do you have any idea what that might look like between the new unit and the old? Any thought there?
Yeah, so the Barney Top Kaparowitz is an area that gets very, very little pressure. And so the permits that are directed there is a population of elk there, and there's a population of elk out onto the desert. They're harder to hunt, but those elk down there, those permits would be in addition to, I don't see this affecting the Boulder hunt. They would be additional permits, directed pressure to an area that currently is being underutilized, frankly. Not a lot of folks hunt it, not a lot of bulls harvested there.
Okay, thank you.
Kent?
Okay, well, that takes care of one of them anyway. I was going to ask about them hams hunts, so that's covered. Thanks, Darren. I do have comments about the Book Cliffs. I spend a lot of time there. It's kind of my playground. The elk numbers are in trouble on that, and I know the division recognizes that, but we're in enough trouble, and I know I guide in the Book Cliffs too, and I know the age and the size of the bulls has went way down. I don't even know that we're meeting age objective on the Bitter Creek, much less the Little Creek. But I would like to see that reduce the tags on there, and maybe even eliminate completely antlerless and spike tags until we get at least somewhere close to population objective on the Book Cliffs. It's going to be more and more difficult to grow more elk as we're killing more elk in a population that's, it's in free fall. And looking at the data from the last several years, it's just been in steady decline out there. And I know, Dax has told us that they're working hard on trying to discover reasons why, but I would like to see us not killing as many elk. And I have clients that were putting in for the Book Cliffs. They've abandoned the idea of doing that. The guys that I've talked to this year, they're giving up on that unit because they have all these points, and it's basically what hunting limited entry elk in Utah is going to boil down to a once or twice in your lifetime opportunity. And that's a unit that's become a unit where you can buy an over-the-counter tag in Colorado and kill just as good a bull as you could in the Book Cliffs, or better. And, the Book Cliffs is in decline, so those are things I'm hearing on the ground about it, and I would like to see it reduced. We need to quit killing elk on the Book Cliffs if we're going to try to grow elk on the Book Cliffs. I think we're overkilling that herd is part of the issue. It's not all of it, but it's not helping us grow any more of them.
So I have a question, and I missed all the question deal there, but I didn't want to interrupt anybody. You talk about the biological concerns on the Book Cliff. What are the biological concerns here?
So Jeff, what we're seeing is, especially in years of severe drought, that we just don't have the nutrition for those animals. So it's
on their winter, their summer. Explain that, please.
Just with the narrow band of the summer range, they're not healthy enough to put on the fat. When we went out and sampled after the drought in 18 and 19 and looked at pregnancy rates, only half of the cows were pregnant, and a lot of them are really old, approaching an age of senescence. Last year, where it was wet, we went out and sampled again, and I think we're high 80s, like 86, 87% on the pregnancy rates. So just with the moisture and the added nutrition, it jumped way back up. And then this year, we're going to go back out and sample again. I'm not sure where we're going to be, but we've had another drought again this summer.
Yeah,
and that's
I know where you're going to be.
probably not 87%. So
nowhere close.
Yeah. And that's what we're struggling with all the other factors out there with wild horses and everything else that's going on. And then drought on top of that. It's a biological issue with where the population is bumping into a carrying capacity. And so where a restrictive harvest, the preservationist wants to say, let's don't harvest anything. But if you continue to let a population age and you're at that biological harvest, that's probably the worst thing you could do for it, right? And if we did a cow hunt this year to look at the average age of the cows in the population to see if they are approaching that senescence, and if we need to reduce that population for a bit to allow it to be more productive biologically, that may be a better thing, right? Get back under that carrying capacity, then more individual animals have more fat, more chances to throw healthy calves. And so that's what we're running into.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Covy. That was a good explanation of things.
So other questions or comments before we start kind of trying to make some motions? And and maybe Covy can speak to this. We're not talking about antlerless tonight.
No, that all happens. We do permits and hunts in the spring for antlerless. Yes.
So,
and this is just season dates, boundary descriptions, and hunting structure.
Okay, great. So those are things we can broach later on.
One question real quick on the hams hunt. The muzzle loaders, there's no restrictions on those hunts, correct? They can hunt with any modern day muzzle loader, or is there a restriction on those muzzle loaders for those hunts?
It's the restriction is the same across everything, and it's no optics, Eric. So you can use a modern muzzle loader, but you've got to use open sights.
Okay. So it seems like we should move into, I think, a couple things that stand out for us and that we've heard quite a bit from the public about is the over-the-counter, any bull units as far as there's an unlimited over-the-counter, and then just talking about lowering Little Creek age objectives. It seems like those two are the two things that are standing out, but we'll just see if we have any motions regarding that. And if not, we'll move on to other species.
I'll make a couple of motions here, I guess. We'll go one at a time. As far as the hams hunts, think we're okay with the hams hunts on the units that are called for. I do think that the season dates are too liberal, and I think there's concern with those dates overlapping with rifle hunts that will be going on in October.
Okay, well, we did kind of bring up season dates and we had no discussion on it, so we moved past that. But if you want
to, this is part of this motion. This is part of this agenda. So we talked about general season dates before. This is the elk. So the hams hunt, they have proposed season dates of October 1st. Well, September 1st through September 30th, the whole month of September for the archery hunt. I would propose that we look at cutting that by 1 week, starting at September 7th to the 30th.
Okay.
And rather than the muzzleloader portion of that hunt going through October when all the other season dates are going, we start that hunt in November 1st through the 15th. basically do away with that October time frame when those other hunts could be going on.
Okay, can you, okay, you're going to have to reiterate that again.
Okay, the motion is that we accept the units that they have proposed the hams hunts on.
Okay.
With the change to the season dates.
Okay.
On archery, instead of starting on the September 1st, going to the 30th, that would start on September 7th of this year. Just move it back, start date back a week.
Okay.
And the muzzleloader and shotgun portion of that hunt, instead of starting October 1st, we eliminate the October portion of that so that it's only November. Or sorry, they have it shown in October. We want to move that to November.
So you just want the 2 weeks in November?
Correct.
Okay. So November 1st to the 15th is what you're saying.
Is it okay to ask Eric a question on this?
Yeah, sure.
So I guess I'm wondering, move it back to the 7th of September. The reasoning for that is other archery or?
No, just feel like that's a whole month. It's a long time. And you know, the first part of September is not so much. You're still moving it back into the rut, keeping the better part of that week or that month to hunt.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a motion by Eric Luke regarding the hams portion of the elk proposal. And we want to limit the archery portion of that hams hunt from September 7th to the 30th and limit the remainder of the hams hunt basically to just November. So that being said, do I have a second on that? Okay, so it appears that I do not have a second on that motion. So that motion fails. So do I have any other motions regarding elk?
Chris, I'll make a motion on the age objective. I feel like that we haven't given age objectives where I don't know. I think we need to give it a little more time. I move that we keep the age objectives just like they are on the 3 units that are proposed for change.
Okay, so the 3 units you're talking about, Boat Cliffs, Cache, and Central Mountains. You want to leave them as they were?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I have a motion by Brad Richmond, sorry about that, to disregard the new age objectives that were proposed on the Boat Cliffs, the Cache, and the Central Mountains, and leave them as they were. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a second by Eric Luke. Do I have any questions or comments on that before we proceed to a vote?
This is Todd. Just curious why the reason to keep it the same.
This is Brad. I just feel like if we want to maintain quality, that we're kind of lowering the standard, and that I feel like we need to continue to evaluate that. And I just feel like we're trying to put a Band-Aid on it. And I just don't think that, especially in the Little Creek issue, I just would rather see better quality. And also on the two that they're proposing to lower, I just hate to see it happen. I'd just rather keep the permits at a lower rate and improve the quality of the bulls.
And I guess this is Darren, but that would not allow an increase on the cash, isn't that correct?
Yeah, Brad, would you consider amending your motion to allow for the increase on the cash and just hold the other two that they're planning to lower?
Yeah, that's doable. Yeah, that's fine with me. If that'll work. Will that work, Covy? Can we do both?
You can do that. And just as a reminder, the NEBO objective specifically was lowered because the sportsman came to us and said, "You've got to stop cutting tags on our unit." There was a lot of frustration, and they showed up at the RAC in force and said, we don't want to see any more permits cut out of this unit. We've cut the permits in half. Nobody's hunting, and we're frustrated. We don't want it managed at this stage objective. That's how this got to the board in the first place. Just some information for the RAC, and I'm not trying to sway what you do, but I felt like that was pertinent to the discussion.
So that being said, Brad,
also
go ahead.
I got one more question for Brad. Brad, would you entertain thoughts of amending your motion to include increasing the Bitter Creek to match the Little Creek? I know Dax alluded to the fact that would be a lot more work and a lot more difficult, but I wonder if it might not be a good idea given, what people are after on the limited entry units for the most part anyway.
Yeah, I've got a lot of muddy water in front of me now. I don't know exactly where to go with this. On the age objective, what I was trying to do was just continue to maintain some quality. And so as far as raising the numbers on the cash, I'm all for that, and keeping those age, or we could even, I'm fine with raising the objectives. I just don't want to lower them on the Central Mountain, NEBO, or the book test. And I like the idea of putting the Bitter Creek as well as the Little Creek all on the same standard, which would be the higher one. So if we could relate a motion out of what I started.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm open to any.
Okay. So what you're proposing, so let's say we disregard the cash. So you want to look specifically just at Little Creek and the Central Mountains. Is that correct? Or do you?
I would say start there, my recommendation. Yeah.
So is he accepting the amendment to the motion, or is he retracting his original motion and starting a new motion?
Okay. Yeah.
Let's retract and reconstruct.
Okay. Great. So we're retracting that. And you're okay with that, Eric?
Yeah, I just have one comment. As far as raising the Bitter Creek, I'm all for the quality. I want to see us have the quality that we used to have there. But I want all of us to recognize that in doing so, how many tags we would be cutting for a substantial period of time. And we're all aware of how it looks and how hard it is to draw a tag, which I probably will never draw another elk tag in my lifetime because I'm too darn old. But I just
Yeah,
want
if
everybody to
my
be
memory's-
aware of that as we make this decision, so.
Right. If my memory serves me, Dax said it'll cut those tags in half for Bitter Creek. Is that correct, Dax?
Yeah. It's a ballpark. It's an adaptive process. It'll take some time, but
Obviously.
I mean, we're probably looking at this year, 2020 issued 120 permits. We're probably looking at going to half that for a while and seeing what it does.
Dax, do you have numbers on the hunter success for the 19 on the book cliffs on the limited entry elk?
On the limited entry, I do. Let me pull them up here. I got it. Let's see. What specific? I've got them all broken out by weapon type and roadless or roaded.
Let's just go with the easiest one. Any legal weapon on the Bitter Creek?
2019 success was 85%.
Okay, and what was the hunter satisfaction on that? Do you know?
I don't have that up. I'd have to do some digging to find that. Sorry.
Okay.
It was 3.7, Dex. 3.7 on a scale of 1 to 5.
Sounds like Kent is on it. He's got it. He's the data ninja.
Heard that. Thanks, Kent. I had, that's about what I would see. The success was good when we were up there in 19. The quality of the bulls was way down, of course. I think success was a lot less this year, but I think that was drought driven more than anything else. The elk were just not where they're normally at. They had pulled down into a lot of tribal land and onto private ground where there was live water, and where a lot of the elk were at when I was up there. All right.
So we've been on this motion for some time. I'm going to encourage us to maybe, it might be easiest if Brad retracted his original motion and stated a new motion, and we went through that his motion again.
Okay. One quick question to Covy. On the Central Mountains Nebo, does that include the entire Manti or just the Nebo portion?
So what this does is it aligns the Nebo with the current Manti age objective, because the collar data shows it goes back and forth a little. So it doesn't change the Manti, it just changes the Nebo.
I see. Okay, here's my motion. I move that we keep the age objective on the Little Creek as is, and also keep the age objective on the Central Mountain Nebo as is.
Okay. Okay, so I have a motion by Brad Richmond to disregard the division's recommendations for new age objectives on Little Creek and Central Mountain Nebo and keep those objectives as is. Do I have a second on that?
This is Darren. Yeah, okay.
Okay, Darren, do you have a second?
Yes.
Okay, I have a second by Darren. Any questions or comments before we take a vote on this? We do need to start moving along. We've got a long way to go. Okay, so I'm going to take a vote on that motion, and this is just on Elk, Little Creek, and Central Mountains Nebo, keeping those age objectives static. And so, Garish, yay or nay? Yes or no? Yes? Kent?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yeah.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Nay.
Brad?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Helene?
Yes.
Todd? Todd, did you say yes or no?
I believe he said no. No.
Okay, thank you. And Dana?
No.
No. Okay, so that motion passed 9-3. It looks like. Is that right, Chris?
That's what I got as well.
Great. All right, so do we have any other items regarding elk? So
I'll cut to the chase and make a motion that we keep the cap as is.
Okay. As far as over the counter, any
Yes.
or limited, or sorry.
Hey, Kirk, would you consider amending it to make it to where they're unlimited for youth? And keeping the cap as is, but unlimited for youth, not counting toward the cap?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would prefer that.
Okay, Kurt. So that being said, can you state your motion regarding elk?
I make a motion that on the general season any bull units, the cap of 15,000, I believe, remains in effect with the exception of youth, which do not count towards that cap.
Okay. So unlimited is regarding use. Okay, so I have a motion by Kirk Player that in regards to elk over-the-counter general season bull tags, that cap would remain at 15,000, disregarding youth that would remain unlimited. Do I have a second on that?
This is Todd. I'll second it.
Okay, so I have a second by Todd Thorne. Do I have any questions or comments before we go to vote?
I have one question.
Okay, go ahead, Brad.
So that would then eliminate, so then my question is, would that then eliminate the proposal for the 4 new anti-bull units, or would they be included in that 15,000?
This motion wouldn't touch that. That'll be a separate deal.
Well, I think it probably needs to be handled together because it's going to be units that are hunted as any bull. If we leave those in there, if we vote to leave those and allow them to change those 4 units, if we vote in favor of that, then that changes the dynamic on which units are going to be hunted, and there's more elk available for those permits too.
So
I think it needs to be handled all at once. What's your thoughts on that, Covy?
I think you can handle it separately if you would like. I think either way is fine. Yeah, and at the end of the day, just so everybody understands too, our goal is to maintain an over-the-counter hunt and not to end up with so much pressure that this goes to the draw. That's what we're trying to do.
And I can appreciate that with what the division's doing. So, I kind of understand that, and we need to maintain some opportunity. And where I think they're adding any bull units to the pool, I think it would be fair enough to add tags as well. Because,
correct me if I'm wrong, Covy, but whoever knows, but in other RACs, they've unanimously voted to change the limit to 20,000 because of those additional opportunities, right?
That's correct, Scoot. But I don't want to, again, you guys.
And I don't know if that's the magic number, but I can see why they did that with the additional areas, so.
Sure.
So that's not part of Kirk's original motion. If you would like to ask him to amend his motion for that, you can, but we should probably get going on this motion one way or another.
If that'll move things along, that makes sense to me. We can amend the motion to an increase of 20,000 tags with the addition of these new units.
I can deal with that and second that.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kirk Blair to amend his original motion to increase to 20,000 tags to satisfy the additional any bull units that will be added, and keeping an unlimited amount of tags for youth. And I have a second by Brad. Okay. Any additional questions or comments on that before we go to vote?
I have a comment, and it's regarding the units. I received a few calls from sportsmen in the Uinta Basin, particularly, that have been putting in for 20 plus years for the Anthro Argyle unit. And now we're going to take that and just open it up to general any bull. I believe that, as I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Covy, but I think that we could, the other 4 units could be added without that. It's not all of them or nothing. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's individual units that you can look at independently. Yep, and everywhere is somebody's backyard. I get it. That's the hardest thing about our jobs is everywhere is a benefit for somebody and a detriment to somebody else, and it's really hard to balance. And thank goodness you guys get to make that decision. So you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for that. But I look at this little unit. I know there's some issues and with that unit and the reason why it was selected, but I compare it to the Thousand Lake Deer unit. That was taken. That used to be a limited entry unit for deer, and when they went to the 29 units, that was made an open season, a general season unit, and the quality and the herd overall on that unit has gone clear in the toilet, and I just see the same thing happening with that Anthro unit. So I personally would like to see that unit taken out, but Kirk's got a motion on the table, so that's just a comment anyway.
And I guess this is Dana. I was going to make a comment. It sounds to me like there's some pretty good sound science, and I appreciate that from Division of Wildlife. And I also appreciate that elk, working group. And so just kind of wanted to make sure we all remember that there's been good science and a lot of good effort in coming up with these recommendations.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Are we ready to move forward with that?
Will you repeat the motion? It's been a little while since we've heard it.
So I have a motion on the table by Kirk Blair regarding over-the-counter general season any bull tags, that number, we were going to bring that number up to an objective of 20,000 with unlimited for youth. And that would include those new any bull units that have been proposed. And that was seconded by Brad Richmond.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and throw this out. So tell me yes or no, please, Garish. Is he still there? Garish? Come back, Kent.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Eric?
No.
Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Lynn?
No.
Helene?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
No.
Garish? I don't know if Garish is there anymore.
Yeah, Garish is gone.
Okay, Garish is gone. All right, so that passes. 8 to 2. Is that what you have, Chris?
I was looking for Garrett. I wasn't keeping track. I apologize.
Okay, so I think I have 8 to 2. No, sorry. No. 8 to 3. Yeah, 8 to 3. That passes. Okay. Are there any other items regarding elk, or can we move on? We're still in that same agenda item, but we have other species.
One thing really quickly from me, Tricia.
Okay.
Throughout in Utah, we always hear a lot of clamor about not having any opportunity for archery.
Hey, Trish, I'm hearing a lot of garbage,
Yeah,
but
somebody
nobody's speaking.
has somebody with kids has a microphone on. Thank you. Go ahead, Scoot.
Hey, this is good, Deanna. We like to get youth involved in hunting, so that's good. We always hear a lot about archers not having the opportunity to hunt elk during the rut. One suggestion I saw in the comments, and I thought was a great idea, would be to extend the general archery season 9 days, and it would have an overlap with the youth any bull hunt. And so it would come with the requirement that they wear hunter orange during those 9 days. But other than that, I don't see really any downsides to it. I think it would be a good opportunity for archers to be able to hunt into the rut. And so I'd like to make a motion that we extend the general archery elk season 9 days on the end of the season.
And I just want to clarify that by Covy. I mean, we already bumped those dates back with the new recommendations. Is that correct? I mean, it got pushed back. They're farther into the rut right now. And I'm not going against you, Scoot. I just want to clarify this with Covy.
This is the latest year ever on the cycle. So as they cycle, the deer hunt ends on the 31st, the last day in October. Everything cycled back this year, but it'll keep rolling to where we'll end up almost a week shorter in several years. So, yeah, I hope that answers that question.
So the archery elk goes till like September
17th, I believe.
So,
but that's just because of the cycling of the dates, Trish. That it didn't actually get moved back.
Right.
Yes, that's
so
correct.
This would actually extend the archery season.
Okay.
By 9 days. That's the motion I have.
Okay. So we have a motion by Scoot Flannery to extend the general season archery elk hunt by 9 days. Is that correct, Scoot?
9 days.
Okay. Do I have a second on that motion?
Kirk will second that one.
Okay, and Kirk will second that. Do I have any questions or comments on that before we send it up for vote?
Will you go over again? It's overlapping what hunt?
So it would overlap the youth any bull hunt that they draw. Covy, is there anything negative that you see from a division standpoint, biological standpoint of doing this?
No biological implications. You know, there definitely could be some conflict. There are 500 youth any bull permits at that time. And again, this is one of those social issues that the RAC has to weigh out. There are 12,000 archers that have been asking for the rut hunt, and so there is some overlap there. Obviously, the archers in that wear orange. The youth have the weapon advantage, but they have the disadvantage of they may not be as experienced a hunter, and so. I'm not going to say that there's not going to be any conflict with this, but I understand the desire as well, and I understand the willingness to accept some of that conflict. So, yeah.
This is Eric. I'm an archery hunter by heart, but I do have a little concern with this because I've received some feedback from people who have had their kids hunt that youth hunt, and I do think that there's a high potential that putting those general season archery hunters in the field at that time is going to hamper the youth hunt. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. As an archery, yeah, I'd love to see that. But I hate to see it overlap and diminish that youth hunt.
I guess obviously this is gonna, during the rut, that's gonna increase your odds all the way across the board.
Yes, it would.
Okay, so I do have a motion with a second on the table. Scoop, do you want to keep your motion? Should we go ahead and send it to vote?
Yeah, I sent it to vote.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion on the table to extend the general season archery elk hunt by 9 days. Garish, Garish is gone. He's gone. Kent.
I see conflicts coming. I'm going to vote no.
Jeff?
No.
Scoop?
I'll go with yes.
Eric?
No.
Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
No.
Lynn?
No.
Helene? She said that. Helene?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes. I meant to say no. Can I still say no?
Yeah, you can say no.
Thanks.
All right.
The first vote's the one that counts, so there's no retracting there.
Oh man, the Robert's Rule of Order.
So that failed.
6 to 5 failed. Is that correct, Trish?
6 to 5 failed. Yep, that's what I have.
You see what you did, Dana? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, can we get a recount?
I liked it, Scoot. Overlapping is a rough deal. I liked it. All right. So, can we leave elk and talk about some other species at this point? Because we are still on the same agenda item.
Please.
Okay, great. So I don't know if we have any issues with pronghorn. If anything is sticking out to you guys, we do have with bison a new hunt, Book Cliffs Wild Horse Bench. I don't know if there's anything that people want to talk about, any of the remainder of that agenda item.
Yes.
Is this be the place, this one that talks about the doing away with the archery bison hunt on the Henrys?
Yes.
So, we into comments or motions?
Just questions, comments?
Comment. I know that when that archery hunt was first proposed, it was actually proposed to happen at a later date, and it was moved up. And so I think there's still a way to provide that opportunity and not do away with those tags by moving that date back to where it's not pushing the bison into their winter range before the general hunt. So
there's not a hunt date on that. I don't know if Covy wants to talk to that, speak to that.
Yeah, I think Wade's on here too, and Eric hit on it, that these hunts were intended to be able to hunt bison. Well, at first it was later, but then early, and harvest bison and not move those bison off the mountain. And it didn't work. With added pressure, it moved the bison off the mountain. And so for that reason, we recommended to discontinue the hunt. Created a lot of conflict. So we're okay having that hunt. But the season date slot that we have open, still being able to get the harvest that we need in the other hunts, as in late January. It would definitely be a hard hunt. And if the RAC is amenable to that, and the public really wants that archery hunt to maintain, we could find some dates there and make it all work.
That was actually the question I was going to ask, is if that could be moved into December or January. and still maintain the hunt.
And Wade is on here too. And again, if anybody else has any other things, but yeah, we could do it. We need to get the harvest to be able to manage the herd to what we've agreed to, and it would be late and possibly hard, but hard's okay too.
Yeah. Covy, could that be moved late like that, say December, January, and even maybe add a tag or two to it, because it's going to be difficult and hunter success is going to go down?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for exactly what those permit numbers would look like, but I assume you could add opportunity there because hunter success would probably decrease at that time of year. Yes. Wade, anything? Bueller?
There he is.
I mean, I can answer any questions if you have more questions. I think that it's moving it. The slot we have is the last, basically the last 2 weeks in January. We need those other, the hunts currently that we have from November 1st to mid-January are really needed to get our harvest. The Henry Mountains bison have had challenges sometimes getting that harvest to get within that population objective, and that population objective is really important to the permittees down there, and there's a lot of pressure to get that harvest, and so that's the best slot that we have to provide that opportunity, and make sure we get that harvest that we need to get within the objective.
Okay. Could we make a motion right now?
I think that would be great.
Okay, I would make a motion that we move the archery hunt on the Henry Mountains for bison into the last 2 weeks of January, and maybe even some overlap earlier in January if that's possible. Have the division look at that, and also have the division look at the possibility of increasing the number of tags on that to get the harvest where it needs to be.
And we're not really talking about tag numbers right now, Covy.
No, we're not, but just as an aside, as part of that.
So basically, they have proposed discontinuing that hunt. You're saying continuing that hunt, but offering it in January, or available dates in January.
That's correct.
Okay. So
to clarify, I assume you mean the either sex hunt, the hunter's choice hunt.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I probably should have stated that in this motion. Thanks, Covy.
Yeah, thank you. I have a motion on the table by Kent to continue the hunter's choice on the Henry Mountains at an available date in January. Do I have a second on that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
And I have a second by Eric Luke. Do I have questions or comments before we proceed with the vote on that? All right, I'm going to go ahead and proceed. Kent?
Yes.
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 Scoot?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
Yeah.
Lynn?
Yes.
Colleen?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And Dana?
Yes, for real.
Okay, and that motion passed unanimously. Okay, so at this point, are there any other discussion points regarding this agenda item?
Is this the agenda item for the Desert Bighorn sheep?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have a similar situation there where the division is proposing to do away with the Zion archery hunt. Once again, I believe there's opportunity to keep that hunt, but ask the division to look at moving that to a different unit. The Zion, obviously, there's concern about having that hunt there because the herd is not doing well. But I believe there's other units that are able to handle that hunt, whether it be the South Santa Fe, the Caparowitz. There's some options there, and so I would just ask that the division look at one of those other units and maintain that hunt so that we maintain that opportunity.
I'm confused about what you're saying. I mean, do you want to move that hunt date, or I'm confused, or I'm confused about what you're saying. I'm sorry.
So the division is proposing to eliminate that archery hunt.
Right.
My proposal is to move that hunt from the unit that it's currently on to a different unit, and let the division look at that. Couple of units that come to mind that could possibly work would be the Santa Fe South or the Caparowitz West units, but they may have some other units that it would work on. But look at maintaining that hunt, just move it to a different unit.
I mean, maintaining an archery hunt, keeping an archery hunt.
What was that, Scoot?
You're just specifically talking about keeping an archery hunt.
Correct.
Covy, is that something the division has looked at? Is there other units that might be able to take that?
If that is something that the public would like to see, is us maintain that archery opportunity in deserts. It's in the plan. It's allowed for in the plan. And if there's a public desire, why we canceled it on the Zion is because we agreed to eliminate that hunt or we cut any weapon permits. And we're at the point where we're going to need to cut any weapon permits. And so it didn't make sense for us to maintain it there. But we can definitely look around. And I know we could find a spot for it where we were going to increase permits and we could add that hunt and put those permits there. So we're getting sheep data in right now, as Chris mentioned earlier. We can look through that data and decide where it would work best and where it would fit best and maintain that opportunity if that's something the RAC would like to see. I would prefer not to commit to a unit tonight, but if there were a motion to investigate that and have a unit ready by the time we hit the board, we can definitely do that.
Okay. So, Eric, are you making a motion?
Yes. You need me to restate that?
No, I can try to do it for you.
I think that you said. Want me to repeat it?
Sure.
Eric, I have create another archery desert bighorn unit in another. So let me say it. To create another archery desert bighorn hunt in another unit to replace the proposed discontinued Zion hunt.
Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I don't know but basically move the hunt to a different unit so we maintain the opportunity.
Okay. So I have a motion on the table by Eric Luke, and do I have a second on that motion?
No, I'll second it.
And I have a second by Kent Johnson. Any other questions before we go to vote, or questions or comments? All right, so I'm going to go ahead. Kent.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Scoot.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Darren.
Yes.
Kirk.
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Lynn.
Yes.
Colleen.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
And Dana.
Yes.
Okay, and that motion passed unanimously. So can we move on to the remainder of that motion? Or that agenda item? We have a motion on the remainder.
I would make a motion to accept the remainder of the division's proposals.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kent Johnson to accept the remainder of the division's proposal on agenda item, big game seasons, dates, hunt changes and rule amendments. Do I have a second on that?
This is Todd. I'll second it.
I have a second by Todd, and I'm going to go right to vote. Kent?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yeah.
Scoot?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Colleen?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And Dana?
Yes.
Okay, and that motion passed unanimously. Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item number 7, Deer Management Plan Population Recommendations. Covy, I have a question. When I go to my RAC packet, and tell me if I'm wrong, I mean, the next thing in my RAC, it goes right to regional deer unit plan. So are these kind of encompassed in one, objectives and unit plans, or am I confused?
No, I think I can clarify that a little bit, Trish, and I'll do it quickly. So one are the unit plans, right? The unit plans are a full revision for the Southeast region and the Southern region. So in those two regions, we were asked to rewrite the entire unit plans. And we do that every 5 years on a 5-year rotational basis. Now the board, when we met last year, or when we met this spring, they directed us to look at the rest of the units. I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback again.
And I think you're, thank you.
Sorry. And they asked us to look at the rest of the units and to set realistic population objectives. Now, this isn't a surprise. This has been coming for a while. And what it's really coming from is us collecting better data on deer, right? Now we have body condition scores. We have better population models. We have things to say, okay, at this level, deer are skinny, they're less productive, have fewer fawns, have poor survival. And if we back that off to this level, they're healthier, they have more fawns, they're more productive, they have higher survival. So what we did is an exercise to look back to the last 10 years population models, and also back through the herd health scores and everything else to say, at what levels do we have more healthy deer? Now, we're on a downward cycle for deer. We know that, right? The climate has pushed deer populations back down in some areas, in addition to having predator issues in some areas too. You know, where they've fallen off because of climate, then we've run into predator issues where predator populations have stayed high. So none of these, that said, where they're down, we know that we can carry more deer than what we have on virtually every unit in the state. Every population objective that we set is higher than the number of deer that we have in that unit. But we tried to make some that were realistic, that were attainable. Now, we did every one of them this year, but we review these every 5 years for every unit. So next year, we'll review Northeastern region, and then Central region, and then Northern region, and then start it over again at Southern region. And if we bump up against these objectives, and I've heard the term, it's like the division's giving up, or it's like, we're not giving up. That's not it at all. What we want to do is manage deer appropriately. And if we see that we can grow more deer, we will reevaluate those objectives, even if it's not on the 5-year cycle. If we bumped up against a population objective and surpassed it, we would pull folks back together, talk again, and say, hey, we grew more deer than we thought we could in the last 2 or 3 years. Let's bump that up. Let's aim higher. Let's look past this. So we want more deer. We also want healthy herds. And those two things are important to maintain deer on the landscape.
Okay. So that being said, we're on agenda item number 7, looking at population objectives. Hopefully you took the time to watch the presentations and look over the RAC packet to understand. I don't know if you want me to kind of give a quick synopsis of those population objective proposals, but I can. I took a few notes, or we can just dive right into it.
I just have a question.
Great.
Why did we go so low with Elk Ridge and the LaSalle Mountains? So much of a drastic change from what it had been before.
And Ken, I talk too much, so Guy and Dustin are here, and I think they deserve a chance to explain that. So Guy or Dustin, would you like to jump in and talk to that?
I'll start, and then Dustin can jump in if he wants. The reason the numbers change so much is as part of the objective to look at realistic numbers, we base it on where we're at now on those populations. And then we tried to project forward with our computer modeling and looking at our fawn survival and our fawn production to see where the potential was to reach in the next 5 years during the term of this plan. And we were optimistic about that. We wanted to give the deer the benefit of the doubt and hope that conditions will be good, that the body conditions or body fat indexes will be high and good, and that we'll see good fawn survival. And so we used an average of what we've seen to try and project forward to see where these populations could potentially be in the next 5 years. So those numbers are what we came up with in terms of that. And that's why Elk Ridge is currently at 600 head. And even with optimistic projections, 1,000 would be great if we could get to that in the next 5 years. So that's where the numbers came from.
And one of the things, Guy, that you've mentioned to me is just the winter range on Elk Ridge being really poor.
Yes, all of our plans, and we're kind of in the next agenda item, but all of our plans were reviewed looking at range condition trends. And we've had a long-term loss of some ranges on the Elk Ridge unit. So potentially it doesn't have the potential that it had, years ago in the 90s when we set these original objectives. So that's
the question I would have to that though is, you put it's at 1,000 deer right now. The objective is the winter range limiting the deer herd to 1,000 deer right now. Is that the limiting factor?
No, I don't believe so. We had 2018, really bad drought, really low production, low survival. So we saw a decline in that population. So, I think we can go back up. I don't know that at this point that winter range is limiting that population. We had, the other thing I mentioned was we have other winter ranges on that unit. There's a lot of winter range on the south end, but what we had in the past was a disproportional use of Beef Basin. And when we first put radio collars on those deer, it was amazing where those deer were coming from to go to Beef Basin. And so we don't know what will happen in the future, if they'll find other winter ranges and build populations in these other winter ranges, or if they'll try to go back to Beef Basin. At this point, we don't know that. So, but we do think there's room for growth there.
So Guy and I have had a lot of conversations about this. And I really appreciate the time he's taken to help calm my troubled mind. But so when I look at this, the old objective of we were at 5,600, I believe. That's what it was in the old plan. And then I see that we're down to 600 deer. I'm like, okay, that screams to me that this unit's doing terrible. And I want it to still show that's how bad the unit's doing. And I get why the division's doing, why you guys are putting it at 1,000, saying, you know what, that isn't achievable. We believe that is an optimistic but achievable objective. But on the flip side, and maybe it's just a fundamentally different way to look at it. I would like to show that, hey, this deer herd could be a lot better where we're dangerously low on the number of deer we have. We could still do several thousand deer instead of 1,000. I guess I see where you're coming from with it, but at the same time, I wanted to show how bad it's doing so that we can realize that it needs a lot of work.
And I think some of that is mentioned in the plan. We've talked about the problems with winter range. We see chronically low fawn production on that unit as well. So I think we've addressed that in the plan in terms of that, and the old number's still there in the plan of what the old objective was. But it, it's going to change over time, and we don't know what that's going to be. We don't know how high it's going to get, and if we're going to reach that. And then if we do, great, and we can adjust. And like Covy says, we can adjust at any time. We don't have to wait. But I think I understand your point, Scoot, and I understand. I, as much as you do, want to see that herd do better. I've been here long enough that I've seen it, at its optimum, and so I would like to see it do better as well. And so I don't think that we're letting that go. We just want to be realistic about the numbers that we use here and be something that we can achieve.
Yeah, I'm just terrified of creating the illusion that at 60% of the objective, we're not doing too terribly bad, So you brought up fawn survival, and that has been a problem here, obviously, or fawn production, I should say. Is there any, Covy, maybe you know the answer to this, do we have any plans on doing a neonate study down here? I mean, I think that bears are killing our deer up on Elk Ridge bad. And that's just my gut.
Neonate studies are the best, man. They're super fun. The data you get is amazing, and it allows you to address limiting factors. I think if we were looking around the state, this would definitely be one of the next areas. Let us wrap up the book list, finish that one, and then definitely let's have some discussions. I obviously can't commit to it tonight, but I love neonate studies. They address these issues that we're talking about, and so. And I don't mind giving extra work to Guy and Dustin either. They're super labor intensive, and those guys just seem to get it done. So we'll just pile it on.
There's a lot of us down here too.
Yeah. And Scoot, I get what you're saying. The division isn't doing this to pat ourselves on the back and say, well, we're closer to the objective now or anything like that. It's just to say, how do we better manage deer, set realistic expectations for sportsmen? And I'm telling you right now, man, if we hit that 1,000 next year, if a miracle happened and every fawn survived in 2 years, the deer population almost doubled, I know Guy would be the first one sitting back down with the committee saying, we've got to raise this. If the deer are still healthy, we got to raise this. And if they're not healthy, we got to figure out why. So none of us want to give up on deer. If there's one thing that we have in common with the sportsmen in Utah, it's that the biologists that run this state are passionate deer guys.
Covy,
and I don't bring that up to show like, hey, I want to emphasize how bad the division's doing. That's not the case. I bring it up to say, you know what? I want to shine a light on it so that the division is possibly given more resources to deal with the issue. You know what I'm saying? But if
we understand,
I mean, I would like to have the objective be a lot higher. I don't know if I'll get support on that, and I hope I do. But if not, then I would like some really concise wording in the plan to say that the instant we meet 1,000 deer, you look at it and say, okay, we want this bumped up to 2,000, 1,500, whatever the next step is. But it's not something like, okay, we're at 1,000. Let's let our 5-year plan roll around and address the issue again. I mean, I think there needs to be very concise and, good wording in the plan, in this unit plan that says, second we get to 1,000, we look at it again. If it's based on body fat, I don't know, but maybe our body fat down here doesn't need to be as high because we're not like some of these areas where the winters are so harsh on our animals, you know? And so
And I guess this is Darren, just building on that a little bit. I see why this is being done. Let's be more realistic on what those objectives are. I guess the only concern that I have is maybe 5 years from now, many of us that are here tonight aren't part of this process. And if you have 1,500 deer 5 years from now, do we say, oh, look, we're above objective, let's add deer tags, deer numbers, because we've exceeded the 1,000 that maybe still is kind of a lower number. I guess that's the concern I see from that.
Darren, what I would say to you is I think there's some safeguards in the statewide plan where it tells us how to set population objectives. And some of those safeguards are to continually monitor body condition scores. And with deer, we're never going to get away from that. The public demands that better data. They want to know that we know what the herd health looks like. And that's okay. We want to keep collecting that data. So these will constantly be fluctuating based on environmental conditions. And that's just in where we are in today's management. It's not going to go backwards. It'll stay moving forwards. But that's a valid concern. I think we've got safeguards in place that regardless of who's there, it'll be based on body condition scores and cause specific mortality and those things.
So this is Eric. I have my concern with these numbers is I get the reason and we got to set realistic objectives, but when we set those objectives too low, you look at the historical data, when we have given up or lowered population objectives, we have never got them back. And that's my concern going forward. We set these objectives low and we give them up now. Realistically, what are the odds of getting them back? Because we know that there are other constituents involved that don't want to see those objectives raised. Right, Jeff? So, it's a never-ending battle. I mean, cattlemen and sportsmen never see eye to eye when it comes to that, particularly on the elk. But that's my concern.
Eric, that's what I would say. I would say if you were talking about elk specifically, there are more things to overcome. But the one thing that almost every citizen in the state has in common is that they love deer. Ranchers, cattlemen, as much time I spent with, regardless of what you do, it seems like Utahns just love deer. And in southern Utah, where we have some of the most conflict, we've been able to increase population objectives on almost all those units, where we had a real deer boom through that mid 2015-16 in there. We increased herd population objectives on the Zion, on the Pine Valley, on a lot of those units down there because we were exceeding the objective, the old objective. So it's possible on deer and we have done it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not possible, but historically it's been difficult. We haven't been real successful in a lot of areas. And you say everybody in Utah likes deer. Well, there's a couple of cattlemen in Emory County that don't like them because they've been poaching them like crazy. I say that as a joke, but that's a concern. I worry we may be setting some of those, particularly the San Juan, some of these units may be too low.
Okay.
If I can say one more thing, Trish, if I can add something to that. The original objectives were set based on deer numbers in the 80s. And a lot of things have changed since the 80s. Anybody that spends any time out on the mountains know that we're in a lot drier conditions than we used to be during that period of time. And we had just some years that were phenomenal in terms of precip and range conditions during that period of time. And so at the time we were developing these plans, the hope was that we could get to that point. And then just, we don't know if that's possible again. If we're going to see those same set of conditions again, we know there's been changes in the habitat, like we talked about with Beef Basin. So it's going to be a dynamic process where whether it's during the term of these plans or at the end of these plans, we're going to be reevaluating this all the time and trying to figure out where these need to be. And the other thing I was going to add is that as far as forgetting about this, I've got Dustin here, and he's planning on staying here, and he knows that once I retire, I'm going to be at his door wanting to know why he's not got this herd back where it needs to be. So I don't know if that makes Scoot feel any better.
So one of the things that
I just think we should eliminate that possibility if we set it high, and I get it. That's probably, you guys probably are not. So Dustin's awesome. I do think he could achieve it. If anybody can do it, it'll be Dustin. But I think that I'd like to double that objective. I mean, in the 80s, yeah, there was more. I don't know. As a little kid, I wouldn't know, but there was probably more precipitation. But I'll tell you what, we did not see bears up there on Elk Ridge. Other predators, I'm not sure. Coyotes, they've always been there. I just think that showing that it's bad, setting it super high, and throwing every resource we can at predator control, creating more habitat, doing whatever we need to get it back to where it needs to be. That's the route I'd like to take.
Okay, so one of the things that I failed to do is, Chris, I failed to have you talk about public comments sorry about that. So I want to get that in before we start to make any motions regarding population objectives.
I don't think there was a specific question about the objectives, just the plans in general. Okay. So the plan, the question is whether they support the mule deer unit plans. 38% oppose, 17% support, and 46% are neutral.
Okay, so at this point, Scoot, do you want to pull out something specific regarding population objectives?
I'd like to make a motion that we set the population objective for the Elk Ridge unit specifically to 2,000 deer.
Okay, so okay. Okay, so what it was in
the last plan. Right. For those that are not familiar with it, it was at 5,600 before.
Right. Yeah, so it was at 5,600. The proposal is for 1,000. The current population is estimated at 600. So he's proposing that we go to 2,000.
Can I ask a question before you proceed? Sorry about that, but Covy, what would it do to the division if this decision to change these population objectives was tabled for a year? I mean, with COVID and everything, we really haven't had the opportunity to have a good public input and comment. I mean, there's 26 comments made on the online. I think this is a very touchy subject, both with sportsmen and, the division. And I think there could be a lot better communication, some time for some discussions. What would it do to the division and their scheme of things if it were tabled for a year?
It would put us behind another year on these, where we're already behind 2 years. Southern Region waited for the statewide plan to be finished before they wrote theirs. Honestly, we could do that. The issue that I see is that it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that where we reevaluate these on a 5-year rolling schedule. And we did get a lot of input. We probably got more input from surveys on these than we ever have when rewriting these on the units that we looked at this. But I would prefer not to do that. And I think it's because it just drags out what we need to do, I would prefer to reevaluate it every 5 years. Northeastern region is next year. They'll be redoing their plan, and we'll look at it again then.
Maybe I will point out too that accessibility to our presentations is, greater than it's ever been, with it being online before the RAC meetings. And we did have 26 responses, and we could have 4, 5, 10 people at a RAC meeting sometimes, but 26 is significant, I think. But
yeah, I mean, I would debate that people have more time to, be giving public input than they've had in the past, or it's more accessible.
This is Darren. I guess I'm curious, Covy, Guy, or Dustin, what's your thoughts if this is bumped to 2,000? Where do you get, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't want to speak for Guy, but I will, because I'm quicker than he is. So I think that there's definitely a lot of biological in setting these population objectives. And so that's one side of it. The other side of it is that I think that, Scoot's being very fair and saying that, look, we understand 5,600 is not where we're going to get to. We may not hit 2,000, but we have a lot of hope that we can show that, we're quite a ways below and we want to grow. So I think the division's not going to have heartache on this either way. We set it at what we were guided to set it at, right? But we understand that there's a social process here too, and that's some of what we're seeing. And we're going to work to grow deer regardless of whether it's 1,000 or 2,000. And so it won't hurt us. If that makes sense. We want them to be realistic, but we also understand. So.
Yeah, and honestly, part of what I'm trying to get at is I want to avoid the social perception that the DNR has given up on Elk Ridge. I know that's not the case, Covy, but that could be perceived that way.
Okay,
hey,
so
this is Dustin. I'd just like to echo just what Covy said. We were asked to look at these things and running the analyses that we did run. That's what we found would be something realistic to hit in 5 years. But there's definitely that social aspect. And if we go to 2,000 deer, same as what Covy said, it's not going to be the end of the world.
So I do have a motion on the table by Scoot Flannery to move the population objective that was recommended on Elk Ridge from 1,000 to 2,000. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a second by Kent. Any more discussion before we move to vote? All right. So Kent, yes or no?
Yes.
Jeff?
Sure.
Scoot?
Yeah.
Eric?
Yeah.
Darren?
Yes.
Bert?
Yes.
Brad? Is he gone? Let's see him. Lynn?
No, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, Brad, are you there?
Mic was shut off. Yes. Yes and yes.
Great. Lynn?
Yes.
Helene?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And Dana?
No.
And that motion passes 10-1. Is that correct, Chris? Oh, you have?
that's what I got.
Okay, great. All right. So do we have any other sub motions regarding population objective recommendations? And if not, we can move into accepting the remainder of the proposal.
I move that we accept the remainder of the proposal.
Okay, so I have a motion by Brad Richmond to accept the remainder of the proposal for population objectives regarding deer. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
I have a second by Dana. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and take a vote. Kent?
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Eric?
No.
Darren?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Helene?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
And that passes 10-1. Okay, so we're on to the next agenda item, which is unit plan revision recommendations. And I don't know, and Covy, tell me if I'm wrong, the only thing that stood out to me or Guy was the San Juan, the current recommendation for buck to doe ratio is 15-17. And are we looking to increase that? Sorry if I was just.
Yeah, if that's the question, yes, we are proposing to increase that to 18-20.
Okay, great. And there was a public survey on that, which was highly favored, and a lot of people responded to that survey. Is that correct, Guy?
Yeah, we sent out over 3,000 emails to hunters that had hunted Elk Ridge in the last 5 years. Or not Elk Ridge, sorry, the Abajos. I was still thinking about Elk Ridge. And we got about over 1,400 responses, which is great. And it was heavily in favor of increasing the objective to 18-20. And they were given the options of what that meant, so they understood that there was a trade-off there. So but it was very favored.
That was kind of the only thing, but if there's other questions, well, first of all, Chris, did you have any, did you want to give the synopsis on that? Anything that you got from the general public?
That was tied into the last question. So it's 38% opposed, 17% support, and 46% are neutral.
Great. Okay. So do we have additional questions for Guy or Dustin or Covy regarding?
I've got one question. Have we done a similar survey like up on the Manti as far as if that would be if that would be something sportsmen's want is to go for that higher buck to doe ratio?
No, we didn't. This was specifically for the Abajos because we were directed by the Wildlife Board to consider the Abajos for that. So we didn't look at that in terms of the Manti.
Could we do a similar survey on the Manti?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's I guess I'm just trying to figure out now that we've accepted the plan at this point, or maybe we haven't, I don't whether or not that would be necessary until we revise those plans again.
Well, you guys have always told us that you can change the plan midstream. So if the survey was sent out and it came back different than what it is now, why could that plan be changed?
I think, Eric, you could ask us to do that survey as part of the motion in accepting this. The part that I think I need to inform the RAC on is that the division probably isn't going to be as supportive of this on the Manti because of the chronic wasting disease issues. Bucks are 2 times as likely to have chronic wasting disease as does. And when you increase buck-doe ratios, you increase the spread and prevalence of chronic wasting disease. And chronic wasting disease is always fatal. So increasing the buck-doe ratio on the Manti may have negative population impacts. And that would hurt hunting and hurt propagation of deer long-term. Utah has maintained very low prevalence, and we also manage for lower buck-doe ratios. where some of our surrounding states that manage for higher buck-doe ratios are hitting CWD prevalence in the 30s, 40s, and 50, up to 50% of those harvested bucks. We're down in the between 1 and 5, you know, and even less. And so population-wise, there is a biological issue with doing that on the manti. And if we were to do that, there are other strategies in the plan, but one of them would be instituting like November rifle hunts. So yes, higher buck-doe ratio, November rifle hunts to target those older age class bucks. And that would be a consequence of going with an action like that to maintain low prevalence of chronic wasting disease.
But sorry, really quick. What Guy said is in that survey that went out on the Abajos, you guys were really clear about what that meant, raising that buck to doe ratio. It means you were clear to the hunters that this is going to mean less tags. And so you could make that, you know, you could be really transparent in stating this is what it means. It could have a huge negative impact on that herd. You could just put that into the survey.
Also, why are we not just as concerned, if not more concerned, with the Abajos? I mean, I think our numbers for CWD, at least in the past, have been higher, the highest in the state probably on the sows. And we're talking about the unit that is right next to the LaSalle's. So what, I mean, it seems like it'd be more of a concern on the Abajos than it would be on the mantis.
Guy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's a great point. And we do have that concern, excuse me, especially since it is adjacent to the LaSalle's. We've only had one positive on the Abajos, or two. Yeah, sorry, I was just reminded we had two. So it's been, so at least at this point, the numbers are very low, and we don't have a high prevalence like we do on the LaSalle's. So I guess we're willing to give this a shot to try it to see if we can maintain that buck-doe ratio without increasing the prevalence of CWD. It may hurt us in the long run if it does.
And the manti has a higher prevalence. We find positives there every year.
It's worth pointing out too that with the exception of the post 2018 drought, the San Juan Abajo was always in that 18 to 20 buck or 20 buck to doe ratio. So it's kind of shown that that's where that unit wants to be. It's almost like you may not even have to do a massive drastic decrease in tags, but it's also going to keep us from having to arbitrarily throw more and more tags at it each year to try to get it down into that 15 to 17 buck to doe ratio. Is that in line, Guy? Is that right? That's the way I see it.
Well, it has since we went to unit by unit hunting. But that was a function of how many permits we set when we went to that. And we saw the buck-doe ratio climb initially after we went to that. But prior to that, prior to 2012, it was within that 15 to 17 range. Is where it was with, we had open hunting by region at that point, unlimited permits by region. And so at that point, it was hovering around that 15 to 17, and it started to climb when we went to unit by unit and set the permit numbers. And then towards the end of that, you saw it decline because we actually increased permits trying to get it back down to the 15 to 17. So I don't know that it's accurate that it wants to be. I think it was a function of how many permits we were issuing at the time. We were also seeing an increase in the deer herd, higher fawn production. So the herd was increasing with less permits. And so when that happens, you're likely to increase your buck-doe ratio.
I think, Kurt, to get maybe a different answer to you too, it just shows that the Abajos has been at that higher level in the 18 and above, 18 to 20 bucks per 100 does for all these years, and we've had just 2 positive cases, so it hasn't really shown an effect on this unit yet.
Okay, so at this time, are there any motions that we want to pull out of the recommendation, or do we want to make a motion on the entire recommendation?
So I guess my motion I made earlier about Elk Ridge would probably be part of this one, right? This unit management plans, as opposed to the. So anyway, with the exception of that previous motion that was made, I move that we accept the division recommendations as represented.
Okay, so I have a motion by Scoot Flannery to accept the division's proposal as accepted. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it. It's Dana.
Thank you. I have a second by Dana. So I'm going to go ahead and take a vote unless I have any questions or comments. All right. Kent.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Scoot.
Yep.
Eric.
Yes.
Darren.
Yes.
Kirk.
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Lynn.
Yes.
Aline.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
And Dana.
I'm mute. Yes.
Okay, good job. That passed unanimously. Okay, we are on to our last agenda item, which is CWMU and landowner 2021 permit recommendations. Chad is here to answer any questions that we might have. Chris, do you want to give us a quick update on what the public had to say?
Yeah, let me find that real quick. We had 79% of our survey respondents were neutral, 8% opposed, and 13% supported.
Great. Thank you. So do we have any specific questions for Chad at this time?
Chad, I have a question for you. Regarding the landowner tags on the San Juan Elk Ridge. 3 years ago, the recommendation, or I guess whatever the period was, the last recommendation was 1 tag every 3 years. Yet 2 for every year were awarded. What was the reasoning behind that move last time?
Yeah, statewide, we're just trying to standardize how we're doing those tags. We have a lot of LOAs where sometimes we're getting a lot more than what an acreage calculation would be. So maybe to back up, in rural, we're able to recommend tags off of acreage calculation, percent of acreage that the landowners have, or we're able to do it on percent of use. We really don't have really good data on percent of use. So to standardize it across the state, we decided that we would just do a recommendation flat out on the calculations for this year. So in years past, yeah, they have had 2 for quite some time. During all those years with the land calculation, they would have qualified for 1 every 3 years. We recognize that the board has granted that to them. And yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
And then what are you guys recommending for this year for the San Juan Elk Ridge?
We're recommending 1 every 3 years. And so yeah, traditionally they've got 2 every year.
Right. Okay, thank you. Are there additional questions for Chad? Okay, so that being said, do I have a motion regarding this agenda item?
I'd like to make some comments now that we've had the questions. I've actually had the opportunity to reach out to 5 of the landowners in that landowner association down here. I've personally seen, I mean, you guys all got the letters from several of them. What they say that they do for the herds down here is true. They're on board with deer on their private property. They work with the Division of Wildlife for projects, especially, on Cedar Mesa. I know up on Deer Flat, the private property up there, that landowner has wells, alfalfa. There's deer all the time. They like the deer. From what I've seen, they're pretty good about allowing people to hunt on their property without asking for a lot of money. In the unit plans, one of the items says that, one of the objectives is to support programs that increase tolerance for deer on private lands, including landowner permits. Now, I do think that the number of 2 tags was higher than it should have been. But I think that, and I've talked to them, and I think that the 5 that I talked to would be fine with reducing it to 1 tag, which is still half of what they've had before. But we're not going to go down from 6 tags every 3 years to 1 tag every 3 years for those landowners. And so I'd personally rather see 1 more buck tag than have landowners starting to get mad, coming in saying, hey, we need depredation tags now, let's kill does, let's not cooperate. I think it's a good compromise would be to take that down to 1 tag a year for the Landowners Association on the Elk Ridge unit. So I don't know if I can make that a motion now or if there needs to be more discussion.
I think you could make it a motion, and we'll see if there's a second, and then we can discuss it if we need to.
So yeah, I'll make that a motion that we approve 1 tag a year for the San Juan Elk Ridge Landowners Association.
So I have a motion by Scoot to give the San Juan Elk Ridge Landowners Association 1 tag per year. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
I have a second by Dana. Is there any questions or comments, any discussion to be had on that motion?
Hey, your second was Helene, not Dana.
Oh, sorry.
It was Helene, that's why I was shaking my head.
I've been sitting in front of a computer now for 14 hours. I'm starting to lose it.
Hang in there. You got this.
I know, I got it. We're getting close. So second by Helene. Do I have any questions or comments on that motion? Okay. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and take a vote on that. Kent?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Lynn? Have we lost him? He gone. Helene?
Yes.
Thank you. Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimously. Do we want to entertain a motion on the remainder of that recommendation?
I'll make a motion that we accept the division's proposal on the remainder of the Landowner Association permits.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kent to accept the remainder of the proposal as presented. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it. Brad.
I have a second by Brad. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and take a roll on that. Kent?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yep.
Scoot?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
Yep. Yes.
Helene?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And Dana?
Yes.
Thank you. And that motion passes unanimously. So we're at the end of our agenda. Do we need to take a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I think
So
you
moved.
did. Let me just say, you guys did a great job tonight. I think you came well prepared. You knew the concerns of the sportsmen and the constituents out there, and you asked lots of great questions, and I applaud you. Very good meeting tonight.
Thank you. So do I have to take a vote on that, or can I adjourn?
Yeah,
Take a
Yeah.
vote?
You need a motion and a vote.
Anyone wants to make a motion to adjourn? Come on, Todd.
So moved.
Can't beat me.
His eyes were like. I was
It's
trying to wait.
unanimous.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kent and a second by
Todd.
way to go, Todd. And let's go ahead and take a quick vote. Kent,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yeah.
Scoop,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Lynn, Stone, Helene,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
and Dana.
What would I do if I said no?
I know, and your little girls are so cute running around.
So yes, we can.
Okay, and that passed unanimously. Thanks you guys so much.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Stay well.
Happy Thanksgiving. I'm out.
Hey, Kent, have a good time with those guys.
See ya.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be fun tomorrow.
I'm happy you guys.
Stay well.